The Tigrayan People's Liberation Front is advancing toward the Ethiopian capital, and now foreign governments are pulling their citizens out of that country, and the Prime Minister is headed to the front lines to lead his military. Here's Sky News Africa correspondent John Sparks.
As the war draws closer to the Ethiopian capital, the defense of Addis Ababa is waged in unconventional ways. At youth and community centers across the city, religious leaders tell residents they're ready to go and fight, while aging veterans seem confident of victory over the leaders of the region of Tigray. And there are sounds of defiance in a city where many feel isolated. Here, a former general delivers a threat with a reference to a colonial foe.
To understand what's happening in Ethiopia right now, we have to start in the 1930s with Italy's conquest of Ethiopia. In 1935, Mussolini invaded and annexes Ethiopia, including Eritrea and Somaliland, forming Italian East Africa. And this will begin what will become 7 years of occupation by the Italians in Ethiopia. In 1943, Italy surrenders control of Ethiopia amidst the war in Europe, and Haile Selassie, the exiled emperor of Ethiopia, returns from the UK to reinstate Ethiopia's constitutional monarchy. This begins a period of time during the 1950s and 60s where Ethiopia is relatively peaceful. It's modernizing. And in the late 60s, early 70s, there becomes a disillusionment with the imperial system in Ethiopia and with Selassie's failure to solve major issues in the country, majorly having to do with classism and poverty. And this leads to protests and strife in the early 1970s to oust the imperial system. And in 1974, the Derg, a provisional socialist military government, deposes and later removes Selassie from power. This ends the imperial system, the monarchy, and installs a Marxist regime under Colonel Mengistu in 1975, and this leads to a harsh military dictatorship. For the following 16 years, civil wars flare between ethnic groups around the nation, primarily between the Derg and the TPLF, a group of Tigrayan and Eritrean freedom fighters in the north part of Ethiopia. This kind of continues until 1991, when the Soviet-backed Derg is overthrown by the EPDRF, a coalition led by the TPLF, the Tigrayan People's Liberation Front, who's later marked as an authoritarian regime. They instate ethnically based federal systems. Eritrean sovereignty is recognized, and so it is no longer part of Ethiopia. A few years later, in 1994, a new constitution it divides Ethiopia into 9 ethnic zones, with the capital being Addis Ababa, listed as one of 2 multi-ethnic zones. The regions had rights to self-government with provisions for representation in central government, and these 9 regions represent a total of 80 ethnic groups and 80 different languages. And this leads to, once again, relative peace in the region, and except for border wars in 1998 to 2000 with Eritrea, until 2018, when the EPDRF coalition ends after Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed wins election and announces the new multi-ethnic Prosperity Party. He then immediately makes reforms in policy that lead to Ahmed being given a Nobel Peace Prize, shortly followed by ethnic unrest all over Ethiopia, human rights violation claims, and hostility between Ahmed's government and the TPLF in the north, which led to a war for the control of the Tigray region in 2020 and until today. The current struggle for Tigrayan sovereignty is shared by the Oromo people, who hold the majority ethnic population of 35% in Ethiopia, with the Tigrayan people at around 6%. The Oromo have had their share of ethnic violence and clashes with the Somalis, as well as bans placed on Oromo language, which has led to Oromos to join the Tigrayan people in a struggle for liberation from oppression at the hands of the new government, who has taken away their ethnic sovereignty, if you will. Currently, the TPLF has gained ground and is getting closer to Addis Ababa, the capital city. An international audience is concerned, and Western powers are trying to stay neutral, as the TPLF, has historic ties with China, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and the fallen Soviet Union. And Western powers like the U.S. is currently watching and trying to stay neutral, as they would likely back Prime Minister Ahmed, who is currently blockading foreign aid of food and supplies to the Tigrayan region because they're worried about weapons being shipped to them, which has resulted in over 500,000 people in famine in the region and likely starvation. As we stand now, the civil war is obviously still going on, and some have labeled the TPLF as terrorists or a terrorist organization, and others have seen them as freedom fighters for their own liberation.